Good morning, good afternoon/afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Chamber, 102nd Chamber annual meeting. My name is Greg Cepas, and I'd like to welcome everybody. I'm presently the second Vice Chair of the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. At this time, if I could ask everybody to please rise for the presentation of the colors by the IUP ROTC and the singing of the national anthem led by Alyssa Boxer and Devin Val from the IUP a cappella ensemble.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
If you could please remain standing, I would like to now invite Commissioner Rod Ruddick up to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
This is always a privilege for me, and I know it's a very, very strong privilege for you to salute our colors. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Wow, this is a lot of people. It's a lot of people. Thank you all for coming. At this time, I'd now like to formally call the 2014 Annual Chamber Board of Directors meeting. I would like to first recognize the board. If you could please stand when I call your name and remain standing. Our chairman, Bob Kane. First Vice Chair, Elizabeth Gregg. Secretary, Joe Ruschini. Treasurer, Jim Kinnear. Ron Anderson. Mark Brzezinski. Jim Calhoun. Dr. Robert Camp. Bill Darr. Dr. Michael Driscoll. Calvin Farron. Rich Fiskus. Ryan Glista. Robin Gorman. Carson Green Jr., J.P. Habits, Kelly Howells, Dawn Huey, Elizabeth Hutton, Bernie Lockard, Brad Martineau, Dominic Pacabanicia, Brian Parks, Sherry Renoski, Josh Rosenberger, Luke Shively, C.J. Spatafor, Brett Stewart, Christine Toretti, Greg Van Horn, Jim Wiley, and Mark Zillner. And then also, if I could recognize, please remain standing, the Chamber's Executive Committee, Bob Marcus, Mike Donnelly, and Richard Clausen. If you could give everybody a round of applause, please. Thank you. And I'd also at this time like to recognize our president, Jim Struzzi. Jim, if you could please stand. Please give Jim a round of applause. He did a fantastic job in getting this together. I'd also at this time like to recognize a former board member. In October this year, we lost a friend to the community and also a board member to the Indiana County Chamber of Commerce. Art Herman, president of WyoTech, passed away in October, and we will continue to keep a position on the board open to the next WyoTech representative. But at this point in time, if we could just have a moment of silence for Art. Thank you. At this point in time, I'd like to now introduce Joe Ruschini, and also followed by Jim Kinnear to go over both the Treasurer's report and the Secretary's report. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Current board members received the minutes from the 2013 annual meeting in advance, so you should have had a chance to review. I would ask then for a motion to approve the 2013 annual meeting minutes. And a second? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Good afternoon. The 2014 financial report is on page 4 and 5 in the annual report that you should have at your seats. If you'd please take a few moments to review it. May I have a motion to approve the 2014 financial report? And a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Joe and Jim. At this point in time, I'd now like to present the slate of nominees, election to the 2015 board. The 2014 Nominations Committee met on October 21st and November 4th. The responsibility of the committee was to review the nominees submitted to the Chamber Board according to the bylaws. Nominees were solicited through email to the Chamber membership on October 21st. We want to thank everyone who submitted a nomination. We received many great nominations, though only a few board positions were available this year. At the November 4th meeting, the Nominations Committee reviewed the nominations and suggests the following actions related to the Chamber Board beginning January 1st, 2015. Robin Gorman with Indiana University of Pennsylvania to be elected to a second 3-year term. Don Huey with Don Huey Custom Building and Remodeling to be elected to a second 3-year term. Luke Shively with McNaughton Moving and Storage to be elected to a second 3-year term. Ryan Glista with Indiana First Bank to be elected to a first 3-year term. Beth Gregg with Environmental Service Laboratories to be elected to a first 3-year term. And Todd Bryce with S&T Bank to be elected to a first 3-year term. Thank you, and may I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. And I think at this time I'd also like to mention the new officers for the upcoming beginning in January 1st, 2015. The positions are for 2 years. I will be serving as the chairman for the next 2 years. Joe Ruschini will be the first vice chair. Todd Bryce will be, with S&T Bank, will be the second vice chair. Kelly Howells with the New Home Health will serve as secretary, taking Joe's place. And Jim Kinnear will continue as treasurer. And I got some uplifting comments before, since it's a 2-year position, I was told that the chamber's in good shape as long as we get through the next 2 years. So with that being said, I'm pretty excited to take the reins following that. With no further business to be brought before the membership this afternoon, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the 2014 annual business meeting. Second? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. The meeting is now formally adjourned. I would now like to introduce Father Tim Cruthop, parochial vicar at Church of the Resurrection in Clymer, and one of the Catholic chaplains for our MC, who will give the invocation.
Thank you, Greg. It's a great honor to be asked to participate today as you gather for this meeting. I always do a little research on the organizations I'm asked to participate when I give an invocation. And of course, I encountered the Chamber of Commerce extensively in my earlier life when I worked in federal law enforcement at the national level. We met with members of the Chamber and other organizations that focused on issues like identity theft or credit card schemes, things that involved perhaps fraudulent billings, fraudulent advertisement, things of that nature. And when I met individuals in those organizations and realized what their purpose is, which is to sustain this nation, the purpose for which it was formed, the free enterprise system which it has exceeded and progressed wonderfully under, it's so important. But I went on your website and I read this passage. Why should I join the Chamber of Commerce? It said below that you can speak with a unified voice regarding community and business issues. You have a platform from which to express opinions, to offer information to the public. You have a watchdog protecting your interests politically and economically, all good things. But then I saw a list of suggested mission statements for the various chambers in the area. I think this was the Pittsburgh chambers. It said, simply stated, your chamber is business and professional people working together to make your community a better place for everyone. And as a priest, I can recognize the great value of making our community a better place for everyone. I've recently been affiliated with an organization that is probably one of the newest members of the Chamber here in Indiana County. It's called Spirit Life. It will be an alcohol and drug detox and treatment center. It'll operate in the former Cherry Hill Personal Care Home. And if I could just ask you to indulge me momentarily, I'd like to introduce the Executive Director, Mr. Lou Wagner. If you would stand, Lou, and the Clinical Director, Mr. Vonzel Wade. Thank you, gentlemen. Just a beautiful example of how organizations such as the Chamber do so much to strengthen communities, strengthen the people that live within them. A free enterprise system, a system that ensures services and goods are available for all people, and the type of salaries that will enable them to be sustained in their families. And as such, I'm so pleased to be here with you, because organizations of this nature uphold and strengthen the Judeo-Christian principles upon which this nation was founded. And as we approach Christmas, and in our tradition, we celebrate Advent, I'd ask that you would join me now in a prayer as we ask the Lord to bless the endeavors of the Chamber and this meal. Loving Father, we come before you filled with gratitude. We recognize the bounty that you've poured upon this land. We recognize the individual gifts you've given us and enable us to be sustained. Lord, continue to pour forth your graces into our lives, and particularly as we approach Christmas, to be grateful for the wonder of this nation and the people of it. Lord, bless this meal and this gathering. Bless the food, the fellowship, and may your presence be evident in each of us as we share and exchange the wonder of this season and continue to work to build up this nation under God. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think it's time to eat if I find the right place on here. At this point in time, we're going to be served, and please enjoy the video that's going to be on the screen. We're going to have a video, and we'll also have a slideshow that's going to be going during lunch today. And then as everybody's pretty much completed lunch, we'll start the program to get everybody out of here on a timely basis. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce our state senator, Dawn White. Our state representative, and should I say new House Majority Leader, Dave Reed. State Representative Sam Smith. County Commissioners Rod Ruddick, Patty Ivanko, and Mike Baker. And also our County Executive Planning Director, Byron Stauffer. State Representative Jeff Powell was unable to attend today, but did send his regrets. We'd also like to recognize State Representative-elect Chris Dush, Caitlin King with Senator Toomey's office, Joe Pittman with Senator White's office, Jonathan Longwell with Representative Dave Reed's office, and Jim Frank and Ron Noco with Congressman Schuster's office. And also, I couldn't see it, but I assume that in the slideshow you got to see the sponsors for today's event, which was much better than the option of watching us all eat here at the table, and I appreciate that greatly. But the sponsors, our platinum sponsors, are Indiana Regional Medical Center, S&T Bank, First Commonwealth Bank, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. If you could give them a round of applause, please. Our gold sponsors, the Ruschini Group, Reliant Holdings, and Force Incorporated. Again, please. And our silver sponsors, Consol Energy, Diamond Medical Supply, Walmart, and CMB Bank. And just one more level of sponsorship. We also have the bronze level of sponsorship. Stifler McGraw Associates, and there's also 3 flower sponsors, which don't duck out of here before it's over because I'm going to tell you about the flowers at the end. But 3 flower sponsors also, and that they would be, or the sponsors would be Indiana Gazette, Altoona Curve, and EHS Support. Okay. With that being said, I'd like to introduce my good friend Bob Kane to take you through the rest of the afternoon. So with that, our chairman, Bob Kane. Thank you, Bob.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me in the back? Great, thanks, Anthony. It's nice to see everybody here again today. Thank you for coming. As you all know, State Representative and Speaker of the House Sam Smith, who is with us today, is retiring this year after 27 years of service to Indiana County and our region. His list of achievements are long over that long and storied career. He's focused on advancing issues important to his constituents, including job creation and retention. He's active in several community improvement organizations, including the Jefferson County Development Council, Route 119 Improvement Committee. He's been a board member of the Jefferson and Clarion County Community Action Agency since 1988. As an advocate of quality education, Sam is the author of legislation creating accountability block grants, which have assisted school districts across the Commonwealth. With an eye toward providing quality education opportunities for students in rural areas, Sam served on the Indiana University of Pennsylvania Council of Trustees and the Punxsutawney Council Trust. He is the 2014 recipient of the IUP President's Medal of Distinction for Public Service. He's worked very hard for the people of the 66th District, and through those efforts, improved our economy and infrastructure immensely. On behalf of the Chamber, Sam, we want to thank you for your service and dedication, and we would ask you to come forward so we can present you a small token of our esteem and thank you. Oh, absolutely. We'd love for Sam to say a few words. Please, Sam.
To our Reverend clergy and Senator White, my good friend, Dave Reed, one of my colleagues and proteges, to our other elected officials and board members, it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Life is a series of challenges which often involve give and take. And people sometimes think the political world is unique or different. And people will say, I don't know how you do what you do or how you do your job. But the reality is that it's no different than your day-to-day lives, whether it's in politics of Little League or the politics of a volunteer fire company, the politics of a country club, the politics within your office, your business, even the politics in your household. It all exists. Different rules of engagement, perhaps, but it exists. And it's no different than the role that we play as elected officials who are here to preside over state government. It's all about the give and the take. But in that give and the take, the primary thing that is important is that you try to do what is best and what is right given the situation. And while we have our own individual desires, the strength of our community, whether it's the community of your home, the community of your business, the community of this Commonwealth, the strength really lies in each of us giving a little bit and not worrying so much about what the take is. That we understand that there is a collective wisdom among us where my idea isn't necessarily right, even though I think it is. And each of you are in that same position. Your idea may be right in your mind, but collectively it isn't necessarily what's best for all. That's the mindset that I evolved. I didn't necessarily see things that way when I got to Harrisburg. That was the mindset that evolved as I grew through my job, and it's something that has carried me forward. I want to just thank you for the recognition. It's been a great honor and privilege to represent the people of Northern Indiana County all these years, and my participation and cooperation with this organization, which, by the way, you have a great, I see a lot of organizations in my role, especially as a statewide legislative leader. I see a lot of organizations, and you guys have a really good organization here. You speak with one voice when you're advocating things to those of us that represent you, whether it be the commissioners or us as state legislators, and you cannot fathom how important that is. Your ability to build a consensus, to build support, and that is the strength of an organization like this. I hope that you recognize that and know that that your leadership team is one that is there to carry out that message that you as a group feel is important for Indiana County. That is your strength as well. God bless you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. It's great to have you with us today. And now, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker today, Mr. Maxwell King. Max, he's the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Pittsburgh Foundation. It was established in 1945 as the Pittsburgh Foundation is one of the nation's oldest and largest community foundations across the United States. The foundation currently has more than 1,900 individual donor funds, and together with its supporting organization, it has assets of over $1 billion. Max King's career has spanned more than 4 decades and has included time as the editor and writer on newspapers and magazines, leadership of 2 of the important institutions in the American philanthropic community, and service on numerous civic boards and committees. He served almost 8 years as the editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer in the 1990s, 9 years as president of the Heinz Endowments, and 6 years on the board of the National Council on Foundations, including 2 years as chair. Max received his Bachelor of Arts degree cum laude from Harvard University in 1967, and he attended the Stanford Executive Program at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker today, Max King.
Thanks very much, Bob. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today, and I want to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to address this annual meeting of the Chamber. What I want to talk to you about a little bit today is the idea of community, how strong and important that concept is for us in Western Pennsylvania, in my view. And I want to talk about what a distinctive, powerful asset I think this sense of community is for us in Western Pennsylvania. But to get into this topic, what I'd like to do is tell the stories of a couple of little boys who grew up in Western Pennsylvania, a couple of decades apart, in different places, but in very, very similar circumstances here. And I'll start 80 years ago, 30 miles south of here, in a great, big, beautiful brick Presbyterian church where there was a little boy, kind of chubby and shy and introverted, sitting on a wooden church pew bench next to his mother, where he sat every Sunday, Sunday after Sunday, asking a lot of questions. He was very curious, and he asked his mother questions all the time. And she had to quiet him down and tell him that church wasn't the best time for him to be talking, particularly when the sermon was being given by the minister, and that the minister was a very, very important person. And young Fred Rogers, who grew up to become famous as the creator and producer and performer of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood for 4 decades, went to this church in Latrobe every Sunday with his mother, Nancy Rogers, his father, Jim, and his maternal grandparents, Fred McFeely and Nancy McFeely. And they were all very, very thoughtful and kind to him, and helped him come out of his shell, come out of his introverted self, and become a more confident young man and become successful. And he later, because of his experience in that church with his mother, himself became a Presbyterian minister, among all the other accomplishments. But the most important thing that he got from that experience with those 4 caring adults in that community and in that church was a sense of values. He got a very clear, strong sense of values from those people who cared about him. And they were the sort of very well understood Scots-Irish, Western Pennsylvania, Presbyterian values that we all know out here. A dedication to the idea of community, a commitment to family, to friends, to neighborhood, to community, a commitment to the idea of service, a commitment to hard work, an unpretentious lifestyle, and those other values that you here in Indiana and we in Pittsburgh are very, very familiar with. Fred Rogers took those values very much to heart, and he tried to live by them for the rest of his life. 20 years earlier, 30 miles north, right here in Indiana, there was another little boy going to a Presbyterian church with his mother and father, and things were a bit quieter in that church. Alexander Stewart was a very tough taskmaster, a taciturn man himself, and he let young Jimmy Stewart know that church was not the place for him to be heard. So Jimmy Stewart was not asking his mother and father a lot of questions in church. But when they got home, he did ask them a lot of questions. He too, he was shy also, like Fred Rogers, a little bit introverted, but very curious. And he asked a lot of questions of his parents and his neighbors and his relatives here in this community. And he had conveyed to him the same set of very strong community-oriented values that Fred Rogers did down in Latrobe. It was the same dedication to community, which Alexander Stewart felt very strongly about, dedication to service, to hard work. Jimmy Stewart got the lessons in these same values in very much the same way that Fred Rogers did. And what's interesting is that all the other groups, the Scots-Irish were among the very first to settle Western Pennsylvania, as you know, and a lot of these values are often ascribed to that Scots-Irish Presbyterian culture. But as other populations came into Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Europeans who came to work in the mines and the mills, a lot of English settlers, Germans who came and started a lot of commercial enterprises, started farms, Dutch settlers who came here to Western Pennsylvania. They all became a part of that same culture. They brought pieces of their culture to it, but they came into this culture and evolved it in the same direction that evolved those same strong, family-oriented, community-oriented values that were particularly focused on a commitment to building the idea of community. And the Rogers and Stewart's clans were really renowned as exemplars of these values. Alexander Stewart, like Fred Rogers' father, Jim, was a successful businessman. He had a big, very successful hardware store, as all of you know here, right in Indiana. And he wanted his son to grow up and go into business and take over the hardware store. And he discouraged his other interests. When Jimmy Stewart became interested in the piano and music, Alexander said, "No, I don't think that's quite right for you." When he became interested in the arts and the performing arts, he was discouraged from that. Later, when Jimmy Stewart became interested in flying and the idea that maybe he'd go to the Naval Academy, Alexander said, "No, that's not a good fit either. The Stewarts go to Princeton. You'll go to Princeton in New Jersey and study architecture." And that's exactly what Jimmy Stewart did. He went to Princeton, as you know, and he studied architecture. And but he, like Fred Rogers, continued to be very, very artistic, creative, and interested in the arts. And his father and Fred Rogers' father were both frustrated sometimes with their sons. Fred Rogers' father was frustrated when Fred evolved a whole series of different interests. First, he was going to be a Presbyterian minister, which he eventually did go to the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary and become a minister. Then he became interested in music. Of course, he later composed 200 songs, a dozen operas. Then he became interested in education and children. Finally, he came home on a spring break from college and saw television for the first time and became interested in that. Told his father he wanted to go to New York and get into television. Jim Rogers was frustrated, but he continued to support his son. He helped him get a job with NBC in New York, actually, to get started. And Jimmy Stewart's father was even more frustrated maybe when Jimmy Stewart went right from Princeton to New York and went into the theater and then later into the movies. Both of these young men, of course, became tremendously successful. Fred Rogers is famous certainly as an entrepreneur on television who developed very distinctive and new television programming, but he is also, in many ways, the father of the early childhood education movement in the United States, and he's one of the great champions and founders of public television in the United States. And of course, Jimmy Stewart became one of the most successful actors of the 20th century, in a lot of ways the most beloved actor in the 20th century. And he was loved and appreciated by his audiences and also by his fellow workers in Hollywood, who appreciated the fact not just that he was talented, but that he was a professional. He showed up, he worked hard, he was among the most professional of actors, and other actors, directors, and producers all wanted to work with him. But what's interesting is that both of these men, as they evolved into creative careers, remained absolutely true to those values that they were raised with. I think it can be argued that Jimmy Stewart is renowned as much for his character, for his very strong character, as he was for his talent as an actor. And I think the same could be said of Fred Rogers. They both evolved in the same background, and they both adopted and loved and championed this community-oriented culture of Western Pennsylvania. It was the Pittsburgh bred and born writer and historian David McCullough, who's famous as a biographer and won 2 Pulitzer Prizes as a biographer, who suggested that I read the biography of Jimmy Stewart. This was several years ago. I got to know David McCullough in Pittsburgh when I was working at the Heinz Endowments, and we worked on a couple of projects together. And when I started work on a biography of Fred Rogers, which I'm about 2/3 of the way through writing right now, I went to interview David McCullough, both about Fred Rogers, but also to get him to give me advice about writing a biography. And he said, if you want to understand Fred Rogers, you've got to understand Western Pennsylvania. You've got to understand the culture of Western Pennsylvania. And he described it in just the same terms I've described it to you today. And he said, Fred Rogers was absolutely a product of this culture, and this culture is very distinctive, according to what McCullough said. He said it's a very distinctive culture to this region of the country. And he said, if you want to understand the culture, read about Jimmy Stewart, because he was a product of the exact same culture, and these two men are very similar. So I read the Jimmy Stewart biography and enjoyed it a lot and got a lot of benefit out of it and quote it in the book that I'm writing. But one of the interesting things is, one of the things that McCullough mentioned to me was his theory, which I believe and I've adopted and I think is true, is that Western Pennsylvania has a particularly distinctive advantage because of this strong sense of community. If you look across America today, the sense of community, which 60, 80, 100 years ago was everywhere, is all but disappearing. There are not a lot of places in America today that have that really strong, binding, robust sense of community. And it's here. It is here in Western Pennsylvania. You know it. You live it. We know it in Pittsburgh. And McCullough's theory is that this is a great advantage to us as we go forward into the 21st century in terms of developing our communities, in terms of economic development, regional development, that people are looking for this. There's an old-fashioned quality to it, to be sure, but there's a strength to it, and people all across the country are looking for it. There are so many similarities between what's going on in Pittsburgh and what I see happening in Indiana today. The renaissance that we're enjoying in Pittsburgh right now is based in very large part on the educational and medical institutions that are there. When the steel mills, when manufacturing diminished so much in Pittsburgh in the 80s and 90s, which was a great blow to the community, it was the educational and medical institutions that have helped given new life to the community. And of course, with the IUP here and the Indiana Medical Center here, you've got exactly the same set of circumstances. And the same things in the economy, a focus on finance, banking, law. Those same things drive the two economies. We at the Pittsburgh Foundation, as a lot of you know, have done a great deal of work over the years in Indiana County. And we have met and worked with a lot of the regional officials here on regional issues. Just 2 months ago, we had Dave Reed speak to our board of directors at the Pittsburgh Foundation about his leadership in Harrisburg. We didn't know then he was going to become the majority leader, but we're glad that he did. And he talked about his focus on poverty and how important it is to eradicate poverty in Pennsylvania. And in fact, Kevin Jenkins from the Pittsburgh Foundation and I are meeting with Dave Reed this afternoon. So I think that there's a lot of ways in which we can continue to work together. As you look at the trends in the 21st century, there are a lot of academics and writers who are describing it as the century of the city. They're saying this because people are all over the world and in the United States collecting around metropolitan areas, small, medium-sized, and big metropolitan areas. Throughout the world today, 80% of the population lives and works in metropolitan areas for the first time in history. Just 50 years ago, 50% of the population around the world lives and works in metropolitan areas. Just 50 years ago, that percentage was more like 20%. In the United States, almost 80% of the population now lives and works in metropolitan areas. Chicago, Pittsburgh, Indiana, metropolitan areas of all different sizes. And as these academics and writers look at the 21st century as the century of the city, they are saying that there can be a very important distinctive advantage to smaller and mid-sized cities that have the things you need in a city, that have colleges, universities, medical centers, arts, history, architecture, culture, strong economies, that have the things you need in a city, but are small enough to be manageable and livable. That's what's behind Pittsburgh's great resurgence now. And I think that's a strength that can pertain to a lot of other cities and towns in Western Pennsylvania, particularly if we capitalize on this very, very strong sense of community that is distinctive to our area. In closing, I want to come back to Jimmy Stewart for a minute and tell you something you already know, but I just learned about it a few weeks ago, which is that it was back in the early 90s, it was Jimmy Stewart himself who started what has become the Indiana County Endowment. I think his first gift to that endowment was around $40,000. When he died in 1997, he left almost $500,000 to the Indiana County Endowment. And of course, that endowment supports all sorts of things here in the Indiana community, has for many, many years and continues, and has grown. It's almost $700,000 today. And the Indiana County Endowment is a fund at my foundation, at the Pittsburgh Foundation. So it's a nice connection with the past, with Jimmy Stewart, and with his continued, even beyond his passing, his continued commitment to the idea of community. I know that Nancy Rogers and Alexander Stewart became, later in their lives, very, very proud of their two sons. And I know also that they would be very, very proud of their communities today if they were alive. Thank you so very much for hearing me today.
Max, we thank you for being here today, and as a token of our esteem, we wanted to present you with the George Rothacker print of Indiana called The First Snowfall, and we'd like to present this to you.
Thank you so very much. I was admiring this earlier. I had no idea I was going to get it. Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
My pleasure. It's my pleasure. It's our pleasure. We wanted to thank you for being here and telling us about the great work that you're doing at the Pittsburgh Foundation. I know they're very excited to have you on board and have you back into town, so thank you so much. And I do have a small confession to make, though. When you were decided upon as our speaker, I didn't think I was the right person to call you because I was afraid when you got that message you would say, "Who the hell's Bob Kane?" So I enlisted the help of Christine Toretti to make that phone call, and of course she called an hour later. You said yes, so thank you, Christine, for making that call, and Max, thank you for joining us. So I'm going to try to be brief in my comments, but there are some things that I want to talk to you about today, and we do have a couple announcements. My involvement in the Chamber over the last 6 years, I have learned that Indiana is truly a special and unique place to live and to do business. And so you might be asking yourself, how so? Well, the list is long as far as I'm concerned, but I'll give you a couple highlights of it. In Indiana County, we have 2 multi-billion-dollar banks headquartered here. We have a hospital just not too far from here that's going through a $55 million expansion. It's an independent hospital and consistently voted one of the best places to work in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We have IUP, my alma mater, a place I'm very proud to have attended, and I think the finest state-run institution within the university structure. So that's a big asset of ours, Mike. Thank you. We have the county commissioners. They actually like each other. They actually get along. They attend meetings together, and they work together for the betterment of our citizenship. And that doesn't happen in some of our surrounding counties. So that's something that makes us unique and special. I believe we've got the finest legislative representation in the entire state. We have Senator White, we have Representative Reed, we've got Jeff Powell. We're losing a good one in Sam Smith. But nevertheless, I don't think anybody will argue with me that we have the best legislative representation. And we also have this facility that we're sitting in today. And I'll be the first one to admit, years ago when they started talking about the KCAC, I thought, what a great idea. But man, I'm not sure that's going to work here. It's a lot of money. How are we going to pay for this? And can we sustain it? And so I questioned it. And so here we sit today. It's only been open 3 years. IUP made the announcement that they decided to retire the debt early. It's been a wonderful success. We had Mythbusters here last night rather. We have the concert that's coming up here in a couple weeks. And this has been a tremendous facility for us, and it's going to help us to grow. And I think that makes us a special and unique place. If you look at our surrounding counties, I don't think they can say that like we can. There's a neighboring county that has a facility just like this that's not doing well. And I don't say that to kick them, but I do say that to highlight the fact that I think that Indiana County is a special and unique place to live and do business. And so there's one other endeavor that we're working on right now that I think that's going to make us an even more special and unique place, and that's the Challenger Learning Center. Now, I learned a couple days ago, and I had it confirmed for me again this morning, that they got some good news, and that they were recently awarded an RCAP grant of $2 million. Now, this is in addition to the $1.4 million RCAP grant that was announced for them about this time last year. And why am I talking about that? Well, RCAP grants don't just fall out of the sky. Okay, they're very difficult to get. If you're a legislator, that's one thing, but this RCAP grant came a lot from one private person, one private citizen here that took the initiative to go and make the phone calls, and that was Christine Toretti. And Christine, I think you deserve the recognition for the hard work that you put into this. So. Now, we've got some work to do. To get this, there's a funding requirement that we have to match from a local perspective. And that's why I'm talking to you about this today, because it's the people in this room that I think that are going to make that happen. I think it's about a $600,000 commitment that we have to make. Larry, you're nodding your head. And so we need to get that done. We need to work collectively together, and I know Larry's going to be calling all of you at some point in time, and I'm hopeful that you'll be generous with him with your ideas and your checkbooks. But together, we can raise this money. We've raised more money for less endeavors that have the impact that this place is going to have. And so I would hope that you would join us. The Chamber aggressively supports this project, and that I hope that you will join us in giving your support when the time comes. So I think the things that I just listed are truly and special to unique to Indiana County. I don't know any other county that's projected to grow 17% in the next 30 years like we are. And I think that sense of community, Max, has a lot to do with that. And I absolutely echo your sentiments and proud to be in this area for those very reasons. Since becoming chair, however, there's one area where I thought we could improve upon, and that was the manner in which we told our story about the businessmen and women of our past who have done great things and have helped make Indiana County a special and unique place. And for that reason, as an executive committee, we all got together this past year, and we decided to form the Indiana County Business Hall of Fame. And I want to give special recognition to Greg Cepas. Greg was instrumental in putting our bylaws together and giving us the structure that we need to get the momentum that we have. And Greg, you did a wonderful job. Thanks. A round of applause for Greg, please. Now, the nominations to the Business Hall of Fame started coming in this summer, and we have a separate board for that, and we met in September. And after much deliberation, what we did was we stack ranked all the nominees. And we decided that we were going to have 5 deceased inductees to the Hall of Fame and 3 living. And so I'm proud to announce the 2015 class inductees into the Indiana County Business Hall of Fame are Dr. Charles J. Potter, Samuel W. Jack Jr., Roger J. Ruschini, Harry McCreary, and John Fisher. And the class of living inductees is Joe Kowalczyk, Gibbs Zillner, and Joan Zillner. So I'd ask you for a round of applause recognizing those individuals. Now, we will celebrate their entry into the Business Hall of Fame this spring with a reception here at the KCAC. And I'm pleased to announce that we've entered into an agreement with the KCAC to put a Business Hall of Fame display case in the lobby. There'll be pictures of those individuals that go into that display case. They'll be on display for a year. Next year, we'll have the 2016 class. Those individuals' pictures will then be there with bios. So I would ask, once we have it on display, that you join and visit that and enjoy it as much as we've enjoyed this process. So folks, as my term as chair winds down, I want to take this opportunity to thank a few people. The first group I want to thank is the Lunch Committee. Bill Darr, Robin Gorman, Sherry Renowski, Jim Kinnear, Laurie Kuzneski. You guys did an outstanding job, and they are the ones responsible for the success of this event today. So please, a round of applause for their support. The executive officers of the chamber, Joe Ruschini, Beth Gregg, Greg Cepas, Jim Kinnear. It has been a pleasure to work with all of you. I greatly appreciate the guidance and support that each of you have given to me and to this chamber. And I want to make a special recognition to Beth. Beth has had some good circumstances in her business that are going to take her away from us for several months out of the year. And she was slated to become chair, but in the most unselfish way, as everybody knows Beth and knows how she is, she thought it would be in the best interest, and she wasn't going to be here permanently, to stay on the board, but to step aside. But I wanted to thank you, Beth, because you did a lot of hard work, and you did the 4 years, and now you don't get the glory of getting up here and giving these speeches. So I wanted to thank you, and that's why she's staying on the board but stepping down, and Greg is sliding in and stepping into her position. So round of applause for Beth. I want to thank the board of directors. Each month we meet and we discuss issues that are important to this county. Issues regarding transportation, infrastructure, health care. We talk about government, we talk about education, we talk about IUP, real estate, agriculture, tourism, manufacturing, the list goes on. And these are actively engaged people who volunteer their time and come to our meeting because they have a love of Indiana County And the board, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed working with you. It's truly been my pleasure. I would like to thank Commissioners Ruddock, Ivanko, Baker. I'd like to thank Jim Wiley and Byron Stauffer. It's been a pleasure working with you. We've had a lot of conversations over the years. You've always been there for me when I need to bend somebody's ear, and know that it's been very much appreciated. Jim Struzzi and your staff, you've done a wonderful job. Can't thank you enough. To my beloved wife, Kristen, for her kindness and compassion. For the last 6 years, she's had to listen to me bend her ear about things regarding the chamber, and I know that it always wasn't pleasant, but you've been a good listener, sweetheart, and I thank you very much for that. And lastly, I want to thank all of you. This is a very loyal group. I sit back here and I look at the 530 or 40 people that we have here, and this event wouldn't be possible without your help and support. And I can't thank you enough for being here, for helping this chamber grow. It has truly been a pleasure and has been an honor to be associated with all of you. I look forward to seeing you again here in the future. The last thing I'll say is I wish a blessed Christmas and holiday season to you all. Thank you very much.
Wow, I guess it's going to be my turn next. I am, as I look out amongst the group, I'm just humbled to be able to be part of the organization in a large way for the next 2 years. And, you know, as being part of the community for all of my life, I take this community aspect for granted sometimes, but they're both absolutely correct in what they say. We do have a great community that we live in, and I look forward to being a small part of that in the next couple years. With that being said, I'd like to recognize Bob, because I will tell you, a lot of people stand up and they'll say about how much work a person does, and they say it all the time, and people always nod their head and they agree with it. And I really need you to know the amount of work that this man has put in the last 2 years and the direction that he's placed the chamber. He's positioned it in a way that we can only succeed going forward. So with that, I'd like to give Bob a presentation from the chamber.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't pick it up, dude.
Wow, that's beautiful. A beautiful clock. Thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy. Okay, just a few more thank yous. I'd also like to thank the Chamber staff for their hard work in making this lunch happen. Administrative Assistant Jill Mountain, Graduate Assistant Emily Vargo, and Intern Brianna Rossi. Also, if we could, I'd like to thank the IUP ROTC, Alyssa Boxer and Devin Val from the IUP Hawkapella Ensemble, Dr. Driscoll for hosting the party, the Cavalci Complex, our wait staff, and again, a special thanks to all of our sponsors. So if I could have a round of applause for them. Thank you.